Once upon a time, in a faraway land,
What are fairy stories?
The strange and wondrous place where nothing is as it seems.
Magic mirror on the wall. Who is the fairest?
Fairy is a perilous land.
Before she found herself falling down what seemed to be a very deep
It
well.
is the place you visit
A world
in your
of
dreams.
myth and magic.
when the clock began to
The
chime
evening
midnight,
star sailed down through the
A
sky.
mysterious voice began calling to the sad
She
princess.
pricked her finger with her needle. 3 drops of blood fell on the
In a
small
trance,
white
she
finger.
followed the haunting
And peered
sound
into
of
the
a
hollow
winding
tree.
stairway to the top of the
You
tower.
can read along with me in your book.
she waved her wand and said the magic words.
Let's begin now.
Well met, witches, and welcome to Storybook, Sacred Lore of Witchcraft. Tonight we have a guest in our circle. Tröll Huldren, also known as Oberon Cunning, has joined us to discuss the traditional witchcraft symbols that are found in the tale of Prince Lindworm. Troll suggested we cover this tale, and I narrated a version which was released as the previous episode of the series. So if you're not familiar with the tale, do pause, go back, and listen to it before joining us in the discussion. Hi, Oberon. Would you like to introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah, I'm a traditional witch. I work mainly in the fairy tradition. I've been an initiate for 16 or so years. I've been working in the tradition for 20-ish years or more. I've published a couple articles here and there around the internet. I was published in Queer Magic, Powered Beyond Boundaries. And I am just very interested and curious about witches and witchcraft, and a huge witch nerd.
I usually ask if guests are willing to explain a little bit about their craft. I know you mentioned that you are a tradcraft and fairy practitioner already, so I don't know if there's any more that you'd like to express about that, or if that's sufficient.
It's pretty sufficient. I focus a lot. My work is a lot around creating witch culture and witchcraft as a worldview that is very against the grain of our modern culture in some senses. Mm-hmm. So I think witch culture is eruptive and radical, and I'm all here for it.
I love that. And we also have Reverend Laura Gonzalez. Hi, Laura. Do you want to let everyone know who you are?
Of course, I live for that. My name is Laura Gonzalez. I'm a priestess and a minister. I'm a witch for hire, tarot reader, educator, and I work with native traditions, Native American, precisely Mexico. And I love paganism, I love witches, and I love nature, and I love you. And I'm so very happy to be back. It feels like it's been a minute since I've been here.
It's been a little bit.
So thank you for having me back.
How long would you say you've been practicing, Laura?
I will say my whole life, because the divination part of it has been since I remember. But properly calling myself a pagan and doing pagan practices, about 15 years? No, 2009. 1924. See, I have 15 years.
And in the media for at least 10 of those now, probably, right?
Since 2011, so 13. Yeah, 13 years.
That's amazing.
Yeah, Lunatic Mondays.
That's amazing. And I'm Frater Aaron. I'm a graduate of the Mystery School of the Fellowship of the Phoenix, a queer neo-pagan order. And I don't usually remember to mention that, but I do today because we are also featured in Queer Magic as a queer religious order in the USA. And we are here to discuss a tale known as King Lindworm or Prince Lindworm. What made you choose this tale as a suggestion, Oberon?
Well, a couple years ago, back in 2021, I think, I was in a class with Lee Morgan.
Mm-hmm.
he ran this class on sex and love and traditional witchcraft. And he used this tale in one of his lessons in that class. And it really got me thinking about this tale a lot over the last 4 or 5 years now. It's become kind of like a cool little key of sort of teasing out ways of building strong witch culture in like our coven, for instance, a way of using it as like a map for interaction for building strong bonds between magical practitioners. And I think it's just a really cool tool.
That is such an intriguing application, but also kind of an abstract description of how you would use this tale.
Sure.
How would you explain that idea of using it as a way of connecting with other practitioners?
So, the story tells this narrative of a queen who's desirous of something. She wants an outcome. And she encounters a figure who is very mysterious. And that's very similar to the way in which, at least in our tradition, people tend to come into contact with witches. Sort of through mysterious happenings where you meet your students. Like, oh, I didn't know you were a witch. And things to sort of develop from there. And my own interactions with like the gods, for instance, and spirits often tend to be very mysterious and strange and uncanny. That's like the biggest quality that teases out for me is the uncanny is always present. They often don't make linear or logical sense, sort of daylight thinking sense. They have sort of this dreamlike quality to their interactions and their communications. That is very reminiscent of the way the story sort of reflects this figure that appears that gives her all these instructions, like do these strange, weird things. And then when she does them, she doesn't really follow the instructions well, as we learn, as we read the story, and all hell breaks loose in her life. But I also find that like when people start to encounter witches or they're learning and they meet their first coven or their first teacher, they often have all hell breaking loose in their life already. And so they're looking to a place to heal, a place to sort of put yourself back together. And I think the story is a map for how you heal after you've encountered trauma. And I think we've all encountered trauma in this culture. This culture is pretty traumatic.
Yes, I definitely can understand the idea of is working with spirits and working with deity, the uncanny and unexpected ways that they can come through. Overall, Laura, what kind of impression did you get from this story?
Well, it was a whole lot of mixed emotions, of course. You all know it's been how long? 4 minutes. You all know I'm a feminist, right? So, 4 minutes in the show, I'm talking about it. So the fact that parts of the tale speak so nonchalantly about all these women being killed by the worm, and the next day another one was gone, and then the next day another one was gone. So that struck a chord with me in the present, right? Not in the story. But then the story is a little bit of what Oberon was saying earlier, the mysterious ways in which the divine communicates with us. And then, like every other tale, the queen is told, eat only such and such flower, don't even touch the other one. And she disobeys. She does whatever she's going to do and then ends up eating all the flowers and then having these consequences. So it's about also how much ambition, in a way, can blind us, curiosity can misguide us, and our own desire, like sometimes we don't listen to the divine when the divine is telling us, this is what's best for you. We really think that we want to do what's best for us. And divine, call it what you will, whatever you believe that is a higher power is often guiding us, and we tend to see, no, I don't see it, and try to walk the other way. So talk about a very costly trial and error,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love, Oberon, how you talk about that the queen does make a mistake, or she does make a transgression against the order she was given. And I know from experience, I think a lot of us do decide to F around and find out compared to what we are instructed to do when we're first, even still, but yeah, when we're first learning the craft. And so that is a wonderful, that is a wonderful analogy that happens very early in the tale, as it happens to a lot of us very early in our practice.
I think there's also like an element of like, I mean, we all know people where maybe we have ourselves like broken a taboo or a geisha or a tengadai from the spirits, like an order to do certain behaviors or not do certain behaviors. And we've experienced or we've watched people experience the consequences of those. And it's very similar, like in that tale, like she does what this hag figure says not to do. And then everything kind of goes wrong from there.
I like that there is a spirit of the forest or a crone or witch in the tale. There's many variants of the tale. I guess I'll back up a little bit. So the tale is known as King Lindworm or Prince Lindworm, as we've said, and it's heavily considered a Scandinavian folkloric tale, but appears to have traces throughout Europe and the Mediterranean and Near East. And it seems to be most well known in English from a 19th century collection called East of the Sun, West of the Moon, which is another wonderful tale that perhaps someday we'll get to. So there's many variants of the tale collected. So in some, there's an oak tree that responds, and in some, it's the spirit of the woods, or in many, it's a crone or flat out a witch who advises the queen. And I really love that the witch is the most knowledgeable character in the story, and in that sense, the most powerful story in the character in the story. Yeah,
she almost takes on like a ghost in the machine sort of aspect of like she knows what to do no matter what goes wrong. She always has the answer. You can go to her and find the key. Witches and sorcerers and medicine people all throughout history have gone to the spirit world looking for keys or medicine or some kind of power there that can come back here and heal us. I think that's a similar phenomenon that we're seeing in that story being sort of displayed to us, or a way of looking at it as witches. We can sort of see into that, our own experiences, and sort of map that out onto them.
And we're instructed a specific spell at this point, where the wise old crone tells the queen to speak the desire into a cup and to turn the cup over into her garden. And strangely, the cup is described as a two-handled cup. So something like a kylix, which would have been used in ancient Greece in the mysteries of Demeter or Dionysus, but also something called a caudal cup, which is used by women after they've given birth to drink a nourishing, replenishing drink. So there's different ways, and I don't have a lot more to say about the interesting aspects of that, but there are interesting connotations about the cup being so specifically described in the tale.
And I think there's also the aspect of like there's the doubling, like there's the two roses that appear afterwards. There's the two handles on the cup. They're the twins after she gives birth. There's sort of this doubling effect that keeps happening, and it reminds me that like there's a lot of commentary on this particular folktale in Martin Shaw's book Courting the Wild Twin, which is something I think folks should read.
Oh, that's great.
I have an opinion about the cup because you guys didn't think about this, but the uterus is like a cup with two handles, where the fallopian tubes are the handles, if you will.
Yeah.
And in order to create a life, the uterus has to swell up. So it's like a cup turned around, right? That's where the belly comes from.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking also what you say around, the two ears and the twins, and her desire to eat the two flowers, that is the version that I know. And it's like, yeah, but when you take more than you can bear, it's usually something's got to give, right? Like the two of coins on the tarot, one of the coins has to fall because you cannot handle all of it. And I don't want to go ahead of myself, but that was the comment. I was like, really? You guys are not thinking about the uterus? So
I am definitely not thinking about a uterus at most times.
I know.
I may cut that
You
out,
should be.
but
I have
that
a
is
son.
definitely
Yeah.
true.
Why? Just leave it because it's true.
And she's impregnated by a rose. So, of course, this could be sympathetic magic. This could be a euphemism. This also could be a reference to, I mentioned the Greek mysteries before. This could be a reference to psychedelic flowers, even in a very abstract way. But I thought that was interesting that this is a recurring motif in other tales.
And within like the sort of mythograph of like traditional witchcraft, as I'm familiar with it, you see red roses and white roses over and over again as symbol sets. In the class that I was first exposed to this narrative, Lee's class, actually, it was about courting specifically the Rose Queen during that class. So there's this whole other aspect that comes in for me of this Venusian tempting goddess figure who is full of life, so much so that like not only as a birth mother, but like she embodies sex itself, and the nourishing aspects of connecting one being to another being in a blooded way. So that's also present for me in this tale.
Love that. The tale turns a bit more gruesome for the remainder of the tale. It reminds me of like a body horror film like David Cronenberg or something. For it, yeah, it turns a bit gruesome depending how you imagine it. So the queen gives birth to a great worm or a snake. Again, depending on the variant you read, it might slither away and hide under the castle subterraneously, or it might be thrown out by a midwife. But there is this secret then that continues to grow through the rest of the tale.
Let's throw the secret, the family secret, out the window and bury it. And then that's it. We don't talk about it ever again. Talk about generational trauma,
Yeah.
To use a buzzword. And we all see this birth where this worm comes out of the queen, but nobody's going to say anything about it. Nobody's going to do anything about it. Nobody's going to question anything about it. The midwife just grabs it and throws it out the window. And then comes the prince, and, it's like, sure, because that's how you deal with problems in life. You just throw them out the window, and then 17 years later, they're going to come knocking on your door. That is very symbolic of, let's just keep appearances. Let's just focus on the happy and never focus on the disruptive or weird. That was that part when I heard, like she just throws the worm out the window. I'm like, that's going to work out well.
I mean, everything we end up bearing eventually, comes back up to haunt us in some way, in ways we don't expect, especially. Like, she threw her problem out the window and she had no idea what to expect, what was going to come down the road later on in the future. It's like a fair warning, like, come on, think about this.
So, yes, in the well-known version of the tale, there is another child that follows, which is a perfectly beautiful prince. In some variants, I saw it was only the snake is born and then forgotten about. But when the prince is of age to wed, he is described in a wonderfully royal way as having a shining chariot and white horses. And he is going to adventure into the world to find his bride. However, the snake, now grown into a great Lindworm, or like a land dragon, emerges and says that the older brother must be wed first. So the snake wants to take a wife first. And here is the next gruesome part that Laura was alluding to already, where the wives are repeatedly sacrificed to the great Lindworm. I have to say, I did like the similarity with the Beauty and the Beast tale type, and there's a whole variant that is specifically women wed to snakes. So I did like the Beauty and the Beast similarity here. Do we want to stop and talk about this yet?
Yeah. Here we have like, so what I first noticed was like first you have like this doubleness, and then you have the twins, but then this new pattern starts to emerge of this 3 times thing, where like in the version that I read, like the prince goes out twice to go, to go find a wife, and he's stopped by his brother, and so they have to go and they have to do this thing sort of 3 times before they kind of find the fix for it. So I'm watching this sort of next pattern that started to emerge in the story, this 3 times thing.
Yeah, and that is something we'll see repeating, is that there's a lot of numerical figures in the tale. However, in just about every version that I saw, the numbers were different. So again, in this tale, there's I think 3 weddings, and interestingly, the first 2 princesses are wedded to the snake, but often the last bride is a farmer's daughter or a village girl.
Yes.
And she is the one who's
the version
cleverest.
that I like the most.
Yeah, she's the one who's cleverest and the one who has the most connection, again, to the spirit of nature or the witch crone.
And in the version that I read is a common girl, is a villager, but she asked for a year and a day.
Yes.
Right? To prepare.
Yep.
To prepare. Which really resonated with me, with all those, the case you go, the Wicca, and you have to do a year and a day, and you have to study, and da-da-da. And I was like, yeah, because she was smart enough to say, okay, all these princesses are the spirit, and it's a worm, so what am I going to do? How am I going to deal with it? Which is mirroring Beauty and the Beast as well, with the having to think about it, not to just jump into things, but to study them and you're still going to gamble, right? No matter how much you study a subject, you're still going to gamble once you get your hands dirty, so to speak. But she went out asking, she was not waiting for things to just be handed to her. She was proactive. Went out, she asked, she told the town, and finally she stumbles into this old lady. What did I say? White? Old lady that tells her, what to do, and etc. And there is a lot of social commentary that I have about why does it have to be the peasant girl? Why does it have to be a woman that saves the worm and all that? But again, this is my 21st century lens into a tale that is from the 19th century. So I'll save that for later.
Yeah, but I love that it's a common girl who actually does have the wits and the magic to do it.
I really like the it's kind of like it's opposite the way the queen was sort of encountering the mysterious figure, the instructor of these sort of the magic spell that she has to perform, because the queen was sort of feeling sorry for herself and despairing, and that's when she met the figure. And this young the peasant girl who is going out in there and being proactive, she is looking for the answers. She's not despairing so much. She's trying to find a way to overcome this. It kind of speaks in some sense of like working class mentality versus like people who have too much privilege.
And the difference between the final bride who does take that year and a day to contemplate her predicament and evaluate what she can do to make a plan, versus the previous brides who just jump into the arrangement thinking that it's a royal marriage. Of course, it's definitely not lost on me either that there is a year in the day before the young girl will be wed to the beast, which is why I think I love the similarity with Beauty and the Beast. It's specifically to a great serpent here. And I think this might be a nice time to go off on a tangent where, Oberon, I know you work a lot with serpent powers, and that was one of the reasons I was so excited to talk to you. And then, lo and behold, you choose a story that has a great serpent in it. So,
Sure, yeah, of course.
What can you tell us about how you look at the power of the serpent?
I have sort of jumped on the sort of a similar bandwagon that, again, Lee Morgan has sort of started. He took a story that was really common in traditional witchcraft houses of like the 4 spirit courts, red, white, black, and green, or red, white, black, and gray. It's a way of organizing, it's a taxonomy system of organizing the spirit world and thinking of spirits as these sort of 4 colors having different qualities. He took that story and innovated it, and he made it something we can actually work with. He started storying it as, what if these courts are actually these serpents, these animistic forces that are both within us and without us, and we can interact with these forces. I was already familiar with the red serpent in the Frey tradition and some other aspects of the green serpent, but the way he storied these has really revitalized a lot of my practice. And I see in the Lindworm story in particular, the black serpent showing up. And this is a force that exists in all of us, and it is the force that protects us. It's the ancestral force that rises up through us. The ancestors live in the black serpent's guts, and that includes both the unruly ancestors as well as the beneficent and healed ancestors. And so we have to think about the Lindworm as like this figure who is he's been screwed by society a little bit, and he's mad about it. So he is reacting in this way that rebels. And that is a way that we can kind of look at our own sort of internal black serpent when we're shamed or when we're traumatized. Our black serpent in our bodies rebels against us, and it sheds its scales into our red flesh. And it creates all these sort of wrinkles in the fabric where our flow can no longer move. So that's one way I work with these serpents is sort of a literal physical understanding, an animistic understanding of them living both within me and around me, and I can interact with them.
I'm very thankful to the divine for the ability to learn and hear other people's perspectives and how the world has, in my opinion, this is my opinion, like one vision of how things work, but each different peoples of each different regions has explained it in a somewhat similar way, but not exactly the same, right? And you're talking about this 4 snakes and 4 colors, and each one representing something different. And what comes to mind immediately is the 4 Tezcatlipocas and the Mexica Tenochca tradition and the Nahuatl tradition, that they are also separated by color, right? So you have the white, the black, the red, and the blue, different snakes. And the black snake, I was listening to you over and I was like, what? Because the black snake, being the black smoke or the smoke from the mirror, Tezcatlipoca, is our ancestral memory, is where the ancestors live, is our subconscious mind, is our own enemy that lives within us when it's not listened to or tended. And then the white Tezcatlipoca, which is Quetzalcoatl, who is the most commonly known snake in the realm of the Nahuatl people. And the snake itself, for our people, is a representation of the word vibration. So our people didn't write with words, they wrote with symbols. And then the snake symbol is precisely the symbol of vibration. And Quetzalcoatl, the white snake, the beautiful snake actually, the white Tezcatlipoca, the beautiful snake, represented the beauty of life. So it's like the 2 mirror opposites, right? Quetzalcoatl and Tezcatlipoca. And they're both snakes. But one is beautiful, colorful life, the colors of the quetzal bird, which is like green and red and teal and all these beautiful colors combined, the colors of nature, right? And then the black smoke, the black snake, the black Tezcatlipoca. And they're so very similar concepts. So just hearing you talk about it, I was like, oh. And then obviously, if we go more philosophically, right, thinking about the concept of the Lindworm being the black snake, being the subconscious mind, being, again, this little problem that when he was born was this little worm, and again, thrown off the window, and then comes back to bite your head, quite literally, because that's what happens when we bury things in our subconscious mind, right? That's what happens when we have a little thorn on our side, and we, throw it behind the devil, throw it on the, on the closet, and we say, oh yeah, I'll deal with it later. And we keep feeding it and feeding it. And then when it appears again, shows its ugly face, then we say it's fate, right? Kind of paraphrasing Jung. Oh, it's my fate. I couldn't escape it. No, you could have. If you look at the ugly black worm when it was a tiny, ugly black worm and not this big thing. So I love the concept, of course, of snakes. I have a snake. And then the other part of it, I was thinking about snakes and how they shed their skin, and every time they shed is for some type of growth. But they do it on their own time, and they shed fully, or at least that's what my boy has been done for 25 years. And I was feeling sorry for the Lindworm, because he was being forced to shed. He was scraped off. Yeah, so I was thinking about, okay, so now we're gonna force this to get fixed. First we don't look at the problem, and then we want to fix it on 1 minute. At least for the worm, we know that the women, the peasant girl, waited a year and trained, but the worm didn't. And then suddenly he's scraped off. Of course, he's done these horrible things, but dehumanizing something to make it change as well. There's a lot in there, so I'm gonna leave it there.
Thank you. That was really beautiful. You explaining things from your own traditions, like, and how they're similar to what I was talking about earlier. That's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. But also, like, you're right. Like, that whole aspect of he didn't have a lot of choice in the matter. Like, in some sense, if you look at the story from the Lindworm's perspective, he's fighting for his rights. And when we're reactive, we're in that state of having been traumatized and reacting to a situation rather than responding to our needs. We tend to not really be clear-headed. And so he was sort of doing that sort of childish behavior, like lying in the middle of the crossroads in the version that I read, yowling, a bride for me before a bride for you, sort of having a tantrum. But inside of us, when we are traumatized, when we're being bullied, when we're caught up in systems of injustice and we can't get a break, we feel that tantrum sort of building up inside of us. And that is, again, that black serpent shedding its scales into our body, going, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. I'm coming to pieces.
The juxtaposition between the black serpent and how the younger brother, the prince, is described as having his, again, shining chariot with white horses. There's such an opposition there, and I can't help to think of Re and Apep or Ra and Apophis, where the chaos and light or order differentiation, where the black serpent in this case would be chaos, and that there's a need for chaos in this narrative, because otherwise he would have remained trapped subterraneously. And so he emerges and he causes chaos. But then something you brought up, Oberon, at the beginning of our talk was then the necessary healing that takes place after that.
Yeah, I mean, once you sort of experience a disruption in the natural flow, you can look at the story as like an entire body. You can see that as like the red serpent that needs protected, and then you have this Lindworm coming up and creating disruptions in the storyline, like the black serpent does in the flesh body. One way to sort of come at that is to sort of think about how healing is sort of what has to come if you want to move forward. Like you created the disruption, and so the only way to move forward is to address it. Like it's no longer throwing the Lindworm out and no longer thinking about him. You have to address it. This is where justice comes into play in the story. They have to make everyone be able to move forward and accomplish their goals. And the only way to do that is to give the Lindworm what he wants. Healing has to come through that addressal process. Like you have to hear what the Lindworm wants, and then you have to like actually try to meet it. But because the whole thing is part of a bad spell gone wrong, you also have this aspect of the Lindworm isn't right. Like, he's not conducting himself properly, so you have to sort of tame him. You have to go through this other magic spell to correct the process.
Yeah, if we microcosm this, as opposed to looking at the great cosmic serpents, where this black serpent rears its head as trauma in more of an internal sense, and then how we have to deal with it, and then who is this female figure that comes and does some painful healing on the black serpent.
And the thing is, and this is something that I have been thinking about it a lot lately, how everything is described as masculine and feminine, right? We have this duality. I'm not talking about gender. We know we have a whole lot of beautiful rainbow of genders, but the dualities of how we divide things, we humans, because on our own limitations, we've limited everything into masculine and feminine. And then when you think about what heals the prince, what heals the Lindworm and brings him back into being a prince, is the feminine, is the woman, and is the washing, and is the patience, and is the challenging, and is the because again, the worm says to her, like, nobody's ever asked me to shed my scales, nobody's ever asked me to shed my skin. So is that quintessential face your demons, right? You have to face it. You have to ask it. You have to tell it to do something. You have to ask what it wants. And why is this trauma? Why is this fate? There's no such thing. Keeps showing her face. And of course, at first glance, it's like, of course, the women has to fix it because, this is so patriarchal and da-da-da. But when you look deeper into it, it's like, if she represents the feminine is usually equated with internal processes, right? The feminine is the mysterious because we cannot see it. It's not external like the masculine, it's internal. So is this metaphor for internal work that is going to take time, it's going to take preparation, it's going to take patience, it's going to get ugly, it's going to get disgusting, it's going to be guts, and when we're healing, that's what happens, right? We are ripping ourselves apart inside, and there's snot and crying and all this very human, very visceral things that happen when we're feeling our feelings finally, when we finally face our demons. And so again, I have to stop myself and, put the feminist cap away for a second. And it's like, no, because it's not representing women. It's representing the feminine divine, the internal wisdom and the work, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like a second birth of this entity, right? At first, he was born as a worm. Now he's born as a child almost, right? Because in the version that I read, he looks like he's 17 years old. And for the first time being cared for and bathed on the milk and caressed and put on the bed and all of those things, which when we make friends with our demons, that's what we have to do, right? We have to pet them and cuddle them and be like, hey, you're here, I know you're there, but it's gonna be okay. So I love that, and I don't even know why I went on this tangent, but there.
No, I agree with you. There's like an initiation that happens in that part of the story where, in some sense, like, again, going back to that map that I was talking about, using the story as a map for interrelation between magical practitioners. One way the story can be used is sort of specifically with that scene of where the serpent asks her to shed a shift, and she asks the serpent to slaw one of his skins. It's that sort of trust that you build between sort of practitioners, where you don't really just open up yourself completely right away. You sort of slowly peel back the layers as you sort of come closer and closer into trusting each other deeper and deeper. And you need that trust to be built so that actual magic can really be worked between you. So if you can't let your internal guard down, you can't let your internal black serpent at rest, if it's constantly rearing its head ready, waiting to bite because you don't really trust the people that you're working magic with, you're not going to be able to do really effective magic. At least I think so. So this is like a way of like, for every, shift that I shed, my student will slough a skin, and we will come closer and closer together in sort of knowing who each other really are, watching each other live out our lives, not just listening to what they say, but like watching their behavior in the world, and them getting to watch me, and them getting to watch me make mistakes and how I repair those mistakes. Like, that's learning.
You just happened something that I was talking to somebody not long ago, how a lot of teachers in all our communities, every community, the immense amount of pressure that people who will stand in front of a classroom of any kind put on themselves, to try to be without fault, without fail, and kind of a know-it-all. And we know it's not sustainable. It's not happening. We're human. We're bound to make mistakes. And to me, the best teacher is the flawed teacher, the teacher that tells me I don't know everything. That's why when I teach, I love for them to ask me questions, because like, if I know, I tell you, but if I don't, hey, let's find out together. Let's research. Let's, do it together. And that is kind of like shedding a skin, like, ugh. Or when someone is a leader of the community, has made a mistake, whether small or huge, and instead of ostracizing the person, there are exceptions, obviously, but instead of ostracizing the person, being there for them, because they are showing their skin. They are showing like, hey, I'm a leader of the community, but I'm also effed up here, and this is the skin that I have. So I think that is very important that we recognize the skin shedding, the growth on ourselves, but also that we don't hide it from people that we work with, whether you're teaching or doing magic together. We're flawed, and that's what makes us more human and better at what we do.
Yeah. And we get to, when we mess up with each other, when we repair it, that makes us stronger. We repair those bonds. They become stronger. They've been tested. And so people trust you more when you continuously go back and you say, oh, I screwed up here. How can I make this better? And how can I make this right with you? And you do that again and again, and people trust you more and more. That is part of that work of shedding the skins and getting closer and closer. And then you have those aspects where she had in the version I read, where she has the whips and the lye water, and she's whipping the Lindworm as hard as she can, until he becomes like a mass on the floor. And then she bathes him with the milk, the sweetness. So she gives him tough love. And then she turns around and she gives him like this sweet love. And then she has to do this third thing. And it really reminds me, it takes me mentally back to the Thomas the Rhymer story of like the three roads, the heaven, hell, and the road to faerie, of, the briar road that's beset, that's hard to travel. That's the road to heaven. And then there's the wide road to hell. That's all pleasure and sating all your desires as fast as you can. And then there's that road between, each of those things is an extreme. Whether you're self-sacrificing or you're glutting yourself as fast and as hard as you can to consume, those are all about yourself. That road in the middle is a road that actually includes other people. It includes the needs and desires of other beings. And so in the story, you have that similar, that threeness of like the tough love, the whipping, the sweetness of the bathing of the milk. And then she does this thing that is really hard for her to do. She has to hold this monster, even if it's just for a moment. And that's incredible. That's a powerful act, to hold something that repulses you, even if it's just for a moment, and literally like hold it and behold by it. That's magic. Just that act is magic.
We talked about the shedding of the skin of the worm and how painful that is, but I love how it's not only the worm who's being forced to shed his skin, as you both were getting at, that she has to remove one of her layers. In the story, it's a shirt or a gown, but she has to remove one of her layers each time too. So they're both shedding something that they've built up, and there's this level of vulnerability that is increasing on both their parts. So he's not only the worm, I'll say, is not only experiencing it alone. They're both increasing their vulnerability and letting things go through the process. And Laura, you especially were picking up on something that I was thinking about, which is like the rebirthing symbolism of the process, which this is another part that I was saying was very gruesome. Yeah, like just imagining a lye bath and being scrubbed raw with whips and metal brushes. But then she puts him in milk, and there's this nurturing aspect too. And we've been taking various perspective of this tale, but especially like kind of bordering back and forth between more of a psychological model and a magical model. And from sort of an archetypal psychological view, the young maiden figure, besides being a literal young maiden, would be the soul or the anima, and perhaps even an HGA, higher self. But mythologically, she's also Kore, Persephone, who in some of the older myths, not only is she wed to Hades or a Zygris Dionysus figure, but has to rebirth him as well. Mm-hmm. And this is like the third of that fertilization or birthing theme that's been coming up, because the first one being the cup that goes into the fertility of the earth, and then the birthing of the snake, and then now this rebirth that she brings him into a young, beautiful man.
Yeah, there's that three thing again. Like you always have, with threes, at least in witchcraft, you have, first cause, something that's opposite to it, and then you have a resolution to the opposite. And the story kind of follows that big three pattern. You have these twins who are at opposition, and then finally through this magic spell, everything's resolved and there's no more opposition, and everyone wins in the end because people literally came together. The whole power of the spell was in the courage of this maiden, of her literally being able to hold a monster, something that was out to destroy her. She had to show it love in this very intense way, tough, sweet, and then hold it. And then it transformed in her arms from this monster into this, sweet sleeping prince.
And speaking of three, there's also three main character females. Mm-hmm. The maiden, the mother, the crone, right?
Yeah.
The queen is the mother. That didn't do a whole lot of mothering to the worm, but the last maiden becomes also like a wife and mother at the same time. So we see also that Holy Trinity of the Divine Feminine being represented there as the maiden, the mother, and the crone. And if we go again into more like psychological aspects, is how we carry all those three within us. We are our own mother, we are our inner child, and we are the person that is living the life and how often do we listen to that wise voice within us? And what is that voice made of? It's usually our mother or the people that raised us, but it's also a lot of societal indoctrination.
Yeah.
So we have to discern, like, who is the mother within me? Who is the one that is giving me advice within me? And then what is my inner child saying? Or in my case, my inner little girl. What does she want? And are they meeting in the middle? Are they, is there a commitment? Is there a compromise between the two? In order for, because, it's like the two reigns of Laura. One is the crone and one is the maiden, or on everybody for that matter. Mm-hmm. So to see them represented, it's also like, a holy trinity.
Yeah, and I love that the maiden was physically able to perform the healing and the gruesome magic with the lye and the milk and all, but she wouldn't have been able to do that unless informed by the wisdom of the old woman.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she had to encounter the uncanny to be given the weird instructions that she never would have come up with on her own.
Right. We've been giving the birth of the worm as like a bad event. And so then the queen having done a bad job because that's how it's narratively structured. But this could have all been the creation of something great as well. This all could have been a wise and beautiful process that just had parts that appear unpleasant to us.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hero's journey. So you have to go through the whole, encountering opposition and then overcoming it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's an initiation again. Like it's a process of going through an ordeal and overcoming that ordeal so that you become greater than the way you started out as.
Ooh, secret drop right now. There will be a discussion coming soon to these panels about the heroine's journey and her powers of connectivity and transformation and how that aligns with what we do in traditional witchcraft.
Right.
Because as we see in this one, the young maiden definitely does go through a heroine's journey in that she is connecting these forces together and providing healing as opposed to like slaying the dragon.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to me, it really speaks of like that force of the Rose Queen, whose power is, we say in witchcraft, she rides the red serpent. She rides the flesh body. She connects beings who have blood together. That every being who has blood is one family, and that all these like ways that we cut ourselves up into different kinds of humans, like that's silly because we're the same kind of being as other mammals and as other kinds of beings who have blood. Like we're all the same family.
Just to give you some something to chew on over in Tlazolteotl rides the red serpent. Tlazolteotl, yeah, another divine feminine on the Nahuatl tradition, and it speaks about the mysteries of the blood, obviously, but also about this renewal, right? You need to blood, you need to bleed, you need to shed, you need to clean the, I don't want to say impure because that's very Christian, but the waste that is produced by the body that needs to be gone. And so it's right in the red serpent concept of vitality.
Yeah, yeah.
Renewal, vitality, and it is when you say right in the red serpent now, like what? It's the same.
Yeah, yeah. I love this stuff. I mean, this stuff is real. Like, it's not just constructs in our mind. These spirits are beings who are in the world, and we don't get to pick how they appear to us sometimes. Sometimes they just show up, and you're like, oh, you're this way. And they're real. Yeah.
How would you suggest working with this tale or some of the symbols from it magically?
Oh, that's a great question. One of the things I've actually done with this specific tale is I created like sometimes I record myself, leading myself through like trance journeys or path workings, or so help me induct myself into like an out of body experience that I can just go off and do it without using technology. But I used a version of the story where I put myself in the place of the Lindworm, actually. And I was seeing it from that perspective of like having trauma in my body and going on this sort of quest to stop consuming so much. Like that's what the Lindworm's doing, is he's like, he can't be sated because his real desires aren't being met. So he has to just constantly consume like a hungry ghost. And he's never actually sated. So that's kind of what trauma does in our bodies. Like it's never really sated. It's a feedback loop of patterns and behaviors that we always do that don't really match what our current reality is. So one way to do that is put yourself in the place of the Lindworm and sort of go on the quest to get your needs met. So I went to a crossroads and I petitioned the spirits. I specifically petitioned a spirit who was solar and is often described as a prince figure. And he rides a chariot. So I like petitioned the spirit to help me get my needs met. And that spirit led me to a different spirit who actually was a female figure, a queen-like figure, who contacted another spirit who put me into sort of an initiatory experience where I was sloughing my skins and going through life experiences that were kind of like being beaten with whips. But But I also had the people around me who were giving me that sweet milk and holding me tight, so I was able to overcome the harshness of life. So all these things in my life started happening when I began this sort of petitioning ritual as the Lindworm at the crossroads. It's sort of a way of, I often like to turn things upside down and inside out as a witch. Like, for instance, I use a troll cross as a being who is sort of more aligned to the Black Court, not as a protection against me, but as a way to sort of charm and control forces that are predative, for instance. So turning things upside down and inside out is a witch thing that I like to do.
That was an amazing answer and example. Thank you so much. Yeah. Do you think this might not be something you recommend? Is there a suggestion you would give for people to become familiar with specifically these 4 serpent powers?
Lee Morgan's book, Standing and Not Falling, it's, in my opinion, it's kind of like the newest generation spiral dance. Like, I think it's that important of a text. It's really foundational for, as a witch who's been practicing for over 25 years, like, it helped me reinvigorate my practice. And as my student, I gave my new to witchcraft apprentice in the faerie tradition this book early on, and they were also taken by it, and it was really helpful to them. So, like, that book sort of lays out the 4 serpents really well, and that's where he sort of revealed his innovation of the 4 spirit courts to the world, and it's really great. I can't recommend it enough.
That's perfect. Thank you. Laura, did you have thoughts on working with the tale magically, or perhaps working with the spirits that you've mentioned in your tradition that this tale reminds you of?
Not to simplify something that is extremely deeply and profound, but the snake, Quetzalcoatl, the beautiful snake, the beautiful, colorful snake, which is the nature all around us. And we know it because we see it. Whether you're in a city or in the mountains, you see Quetzalcoatl on the beautiful vibration of life, on everything. And quite often we don't look at Tezcatlipocas, which is the black snake, the black smoke that comes from the smoke from the mirror is literally the translation name. And it's talking about how our memories are fuzzy at times. Our connections with our ancestries and our histories are fuzzy, diluted. You know, there are false memories at times, and this is science proven because of academia. But I think if we learn to, and it's not like the meme that I'm always pushing people towards their demons, but I've been told that I do that. But it's an invitation to also look at the dark side. We have cookies, come to the dark side. And quite literally is reflecting on seeing beyond the smoke, our desires, our memories. What are we hungry for? What is our Lindworm wanting to eat? And it's about reflection. It's about sitting with Tezcatlipocas and seeing beyond the smoke. Is sitting quietly and letting that spirit, that entity, that form take a hold and tell you, like, you're hungry for this because this and that. And then maybe develop a action plan. But part of the philosophy on the Nahuatl tradition is, and I just recently learned this, being said is this, the rock only breaks with cold and hot. So you cannot only give it love and tenderness, you sometimes have to turn up the heat and bring the fire and tough love, like you said earlier, over. And that is the dance between the 2 serpents, right? That is the dance between the white Tezcatlipoca and the black Tezcatlipoca. Looking inward. We are programmed by society, we're indoctrinated to make it all about the outside. And as witches, I think witches intrinsically look within, but I think it hasn't been a habit yet for so many of us.
Right.
And when we make it a habit, when we make it part of our practice, when we do, and I don't want to say shadow work because it's been so diluted, the term, but that's how people understand it, shadow work, is visiting that realm of Tezcatlipocas, going into the cave of the ancestors, the dream realm, the dead, and yeah. So, meditation, introspection, time of quiet, and if you want to connect with ancestors, I will refer people to the show where we did with Dave when we were talking about ancestors, but also to not be afraid of the ugliness of the snake. The snake is going to be ugly for a minute, and then things are going to get clearer and clearer and clearer. And then comes consciousness and happiness, and it's priceless. Because when you live and when you love consciously, it's just priceless. It's beautiful.
Yeah. One of the things that came to mind, part of it was a spirit that I work with just talking to me, but also while you were speaking, it brought something up to them. Our ancestry is material. It's not just like a spiritual thing, but like the reputations our ancestors had shaped our childhoods because they provided us access or not to resources because of our ancestors' reputations in the communities where we grow up. And that shaped our lives in very material ways. And we have to start thinking about how our ancestry is a physical presence in our lives, that they literally have made us not just the meat of our lives, but like the social fabric of our lives. They've created that here. And you can kind of see that in the Lindworm story, like what they did in the past, like the Queen's mistake and how she tried to cover it up and forget about it, came back. The generational trauma thing that you brought up earlier, Laura, is so very real. Like it haunts our lives, and that Lindworm will keep showing up as ancestral patterns, not just in our own lives through the work that we do, because we've been conditioned by the people who are conditioned by the people who are conditioned by the people, etc., all the way back through our lineages, but also the fabric of all the crazy that's happening around us. So that it'll just keep happening until we really heal those wounds in us. Those ancestral wounds have to be healed by addressing the material circumstances that we live in. Like huge portions of our human, ancestries weren't given the same shake as other huge portions of our human ancestries. And that has to be rectified in the bigger scheme of all of our social lives, because that has to mean that, the Lindworm from your ancestry and the Lindworm from my ancestry have to become princes someday.
And the origin doesn't dictate the destination.
Yes.
Or family of origin, or country of origin, or condition of origin is not our destination. Fate does not exist, said the tarot reader. But it's true. Fate does not exist. Because even in tarot, we talk about, or at least the way that I read, the way that I interpret the cards is like, this is one probable path that you can or cannot make appear before you. We have the control. We have the power, but we have to tame the black smoke. We have to ride the snake, in order to change our origin. Our origin does not dictate our destination. Period.
And is it accurate to say without Tezcatlipoca, the dark mirror, that there wouldn't be divination?
Oh, you open a can of worms.
Uh-oh.
There would not be divination without Tezcatlipoca, period. Quite literally in history, the black mirror, the obsidian mirrors, the colonizers colonized, right? They came to America. The continent, America is not a country, it's a continent. They came to America, the continent, they went to Mexico. So the wise people scrying, looking into the obsidian mirrors, and colonizers be colonizing. They're like, oh, me likey, and they took them, and they took those mirrors, and it was stolen. And so a big, big school of divination on Scry and the Black Mirror, the mirror on the wall. It has its origins on the Nahua people. Thank you very much. But it's also not just the Scry in a less realistic form, in a more metaphorical answer. Without that ancestral memory, without that connection with the collective consciousness of humanity, there will be no divination. We all have the ability to tap into the unknown. It's like the ability to sing. We can all sing. Not everybody's Freddie Mercury, but if I go to school and I teach myself how to sing, I could sing. Same for divination. I think we all have the ability to tap into collective consciousness, ancestral wisdom, or on DNA. Whatever this information comes when we're doing divination, we can all tap into it. For some, it's easier than for others because natural talent exists. But the more we listen to Tezcatlipoca, the more we listen to our intuition, the more we get out of the way and let the black snake through, the stronger our divination abilities become. And it's not divination as in, I know the lottery ticket number and it's divination as this wisdom that you need on your day-to-day. And to learn to read the signs, I've said this before, Aaron, I know you know that. What makes a witch is that the witch is conscious. It's consciousness. It's constantly being with the eyes wide open to the known and the unknown. But you need practice. You need to tap into the Tezcatlipoca or collective consciousness or the black smoke, whatever you want to call it. It's got many names.
I love seeing the image of the serpent physically in the smoke. So when we're giving our incense offerings and the curling wisps of smoke becoming the coils of the snake as well, as you pointed out, Laura, in all things vibrational. I also love that we were given the spell of the cup to fertilize the land with. And as you were getting at, Oberon, how using the tail to get to the heart of something or to reveal something. And in the more well-known English translation, there's even a little chant like "Fair maiden shed a shift, Prince Lindworm slough a skin," and how we could utilize that in repetition. Was there anything you were hoping to discuss today that we have not gotten to in our talk on this story?
I think that it's worth pointing out that, again, just sort of reiterating that point of like how we all live in this culture that is pretty traumatic, especially for people who aren't inhabiting certain kinds of bodies, and that this tale is a great way to magically assess the strength of the connections we have around us as magical practitioners. So we can like look at that a way of like approaching each other by sloughing our skins and revealing our inner landscapes to each other in a real profound way, and showing each other real love in a sense of like not just coddling everybody around you, but like helping. I always think of my favorite definition of love is that it is a way of lifting up the people around you so they become better versions of themselves. That love is a verb, and that you have to enact it. It's not a feeling that you feel that you have to do this thing. So for me, love is lifting up the people around me so that they become better than they were before, that they become the best versions of themselves, and that we have to work together. And the Lindworm story shows us that you kind of need help along the way. That interaction from spirits or from our magical allies, whether they're human beings or any other way they come into our lives, that's important. Nothing is accomplished alone.
Beautiful. Do you work with people predominantly in person or virtually as well?
I only work with people in person. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Laura, for people who are curious more about these enigmatic goddess figures you've been telling us about, what should they do?
What should they do? They should come to linktree/blue_witch and find all of my plethora of offerings that I offer to the public. I do most of my teaching online. So starting on January of 2024, I started a new series. Every year I teach a series of different topics, and this year it is the colonizing the goddess. We're talking of the feminine divine from a perspective of the Nahua people, the Mexica Tenochca traditions, or the so-called Aztec, which is incorrect to call them Aztec. But anyway, for all intents and purposes, Aztec goddesses. And we have seen a great number of them already. The Mother Goddess, the Goddess of Fire, the Clearwater Goddess, the Sky Above Us, the Stars Goddess. That was our class for June, or July rather. And so if you didn't catch the class live, you can buy them on demand. And if you want to catch the next month's class, you can go follow me on my Linktree. Or you can follow me on Instagram as Magia Cerati, MAGIACERATI. So hard to spell. And you can find about all my offerings, classes, etc. But I also come to the real world once in a while, and I teach in person. So I've been teaching some related to magic, paganism, native, indigenous, Mexican magic stuff on workshops. So if you're in Chicago, you can catch me on my next workshop, and it's going to have a little bit of all that seasoning together. I don't know of anybody else that is doing the native, traditional Mexican and pagan stuff kind of together. Majority of the times we see the native stuff mixed with Christianity or Catholicism, or pagan only, or New Age, Mexica. I don't do that. It's more like a pagan, Aztec, indigenous type of thing. So come find me. And like I mentioned earlier, right, the podcast Lunatic Mondays, twice a month I have a whole bunch of guests that come and talk about their books, publications, projects, etc. A fine range of authors and artists on the pagan world. So Lunatic Mondays twice a month. And of course I'm here, and I'm on Mystic Chat and all of that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Oberon, you have a very active and refreshingly conscious social media presence. Do you welcome people to find you?
Yeah. Reach out to me. I think I have my Instagram under Tröll Huldren right now. TROLL, I think _HULRDREN. And I'm also on Facebook if people want to friend me. But yeah, I'm active being a witch nerd online, talking about the occult all over the place when I can. I'm also a chef, so I'm very busy with my own chefing stuff. So,
I love when the chef posts cross over. That makes me very happy. And with that, for everyone, until we next meet again, may all your travels be filled with wonder.
Yeah, it was cool. Thank you.